Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter. I am the founder and executive director of Courage 365, and we have a great show planned for you tonight. We have Megan Cox on the show tonight. She is an amazing advocate. She has quite a few things going on, lots of trainings and certifications in trauma response and prevention. And while we have talked to people of all different walks of life, one thing that we know here at Courage 365 is that everybody's healing journey is different. A couple weeks ago, we talked to Chrissy Stroop, who was all about that atheist life now. And we talked about how that was a healing path for a lot of people. In this show, we're going to be talking about those who decided, you know what, I actually want to keep my faith, but maybe shift it and change it in different ways. And so I'm really excited to have that discussion because everybody has different things that we need. We support all of that here. And yeah, so I'm just going to read Megan's bio really quickly before we bring her onto the show. And it's quite extensive, all of the different trainings and certifications she has. It's pretty amazing here. So let me just get into it. Megan is fully certified since 2012 as a crisis pastoral counselor, an MAR pastoral and counseling. Megan has successfully championed clients all over the country while facilitating self-growth. Her services aim to help heal trauma and abuse, work with those who are suffering from dissociative disorders, and even serve the evangelical community, which I know a lot of us are a part of here. Those who are leaving their church, but the ones who decide not to leave their faith. She leads spiritual processing groups, particularly around evangelicals and evangelicals reshifting, moving their faith. I've had conversations with her about that, which is quite interesting. We'll get to on the show. She is trained in EMDR therapy, which I know a lot of us have been talking about, and it's such a great modality for survivors. We're going to get into what that is on the show. Also in DNMS, which is Developmental Needs Meeting Strategy. It's a different certification she's trained in to help support. She also has a certification in bereavement, crisis response, trauma therapies, and suicidology. She's a chaplain and certified with ACPE. So like I said, so many amazing different modalities. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. But before we bring Megan onto the show, we're going to pause for a minute to have a few messages brought to us by our sponsors.
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing CalmiGo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using CalmiGo today.
Talk about it. I was told not to talk about it.
So I'm here to talk about it.
Because I can't stay quiet.
I was able to break my silence.
Because of those who refuse to stay quiet.
I am a businesswoman.
Activist.
Survivor.
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 Hey, Megan, and welcome to the Courage Conversation Show. So excited to have you here.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute honor and a privilege.
Oh, well, we're excited, and I think that this is just going to be such an interesting conversation. And I don't know, I just want to dive right in. And one of the first questions that I have for you, Megan, is like I mentioned in the introduction, we've had all different kinds of guests on our show who do all different types of healing modalities. And that's what we love about it here, because everybody's journey is so unique. And so whether somebody identifies as an atheist, whether they're agnostic, whether they decide to stay with their faith or switch faiths entirely, we respect all the different paths. But we know that a lot of our survivors have come from Christian backgrounds in particular. And for some of them, it really feels like a trauma for them to lose that faith after abuse. And so they actually want to reclaim it and keep it for themselves, but to do that in a healthier, more aligned way, in a way that is respectful of their trauma and the trauma of others. So I guess my question for you is, what would you say to a survivor who really is in that position? They've decided, you know what, I really want to keep my faith. This isn't something that I want to give up because of what I've experienced, but maybe they want to redefine it. What would be some of your advice and some of the things that you would say to them if somebody's in a position like that?
Well, first of all, Ashley, I just love the approach that you have. I love your Sitz im Leben, sort of where you, the place of which you operate out of, right? We're going to accept, we're going to show dignity to everybody's journey. Everyone has choices. The last thing we want to do as any sort of advocate or counselor is take away somebody's choice. That's happened enough, right?
Right.
They've had enough of that. And so our values over here at Mountain City Christian Counseling consist of companionship, compassion, and curiosity. Those are our 3 C's. Those are our values. And that comes from a very, very deep-seated place in our own value system, which is that every human being has dignity, is stamped with dignity. Every human being is a galaxy unto themselves. And so we do have choices. Like you said, which I thought this was brilliant. Some people say, you know what, they've taken everything from me, but my faith is important to me, so I'm going to do whatever I can to keep it.
Yeah.
And then we have other clients too who say, you know what, this faith has caused me no end of problems. And I can shake this pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
And start it. All of that is to be respected. If we take away somebody's choice or try to coerce, we're no better than what they've been dealing with. So we actually, the first thing I think I would say is you have a sound mind. You have your own spirit. You have a core spiritual self that's been there with you from the beginning and will go on from here. You are capable of making these decisions. That's what I would say. We do run these spiritual process groups, which are 12 weeks in 3 units. So that's 9 months altogether.
Yep.
And what we do is we present different viewpoints surrounding different topics. So the first 3 weeks, I think we work on grief and lament as groups, because we do have things to grieve. We have to grieve the old beliefs that were destructive. We have to grieve the dogma that kept us in bondage. And so we spend 3 weeks on that. We talk, Ashley, about everything. These are beautiful groups. We are about to open them back up again. July 1st is our registration day opening, and it goes till July 15th, I believe. But this is the second year that we will be running these groups, and we talk about the Gnostic Gospels. We talk about Greek mythology. We get really deep into the theology of everything. So we're breaking down. There's an element of deconstruction, but where each client decides to land is up to them. So some people do keep their faith, some people don't. And that's not up to us. That's not my decision. Right. So I see it more as a facilitator of healing through breaking down destructive dogmas. And in the end, everybody has free will. They just do, right?
Absolutely. I love that so much. And also just how much you're focusing on really trusting people, because I think that's what happens with abuse is it's all about power and control. And so when we're controlling people, there's a lot of reasons people control, but at the root of it, it's really not trusting that other person to do what's right for themselves, or not caring if they do what's right for themselves. And so this is really flipping it on its head and saying, you know what, we trust you, as a survivor to decide what is best for your journey. But we've all got questions. So here's a place where we can ask those questions safely in a non-judgmental format, and where we can really wade through a lot of things that we were told we couldn't talk about. Like, just for instance, even like the idea of talking about the Gnostic Gospels. Like, I know that I've read the book of Mary Magdalene, which was like a big no. But as I read that, I was like, wow, this is really interesting and not what I was told that it is. And so even just giving people a safe place to maybe read different information, have different conversations that simply weren't allowed before. I think knowledge is super powerful and really does lead to freedom. And so I love that you're able to do that for your clients in a safe space.
It is very safe. Thank you for saying that. And you're so right, Ashley. When we feel as though we can make better decisions for somebody than they can for themselves, we've entered into an arrogance, and we've crossed a boundary that's not ours to cross, right?
Yeah.
People's lives are sacred ground. And so we are very careful to honor everybody's story with fear and trembling. So in these groups that are about to open up, we usually have 3 people, 3 humans per group, and then we have a trained, it's clinician. It's not even a moderator, but a trained clinician. We teach this sort of reflexive practice where, so you mentioned questions. We talk a lot about Job. Like, if Job could ask questions, we can't do, right?
Right.
So
right.
all the questions, if faith can't hold up under the questions, then that's okay too. What are we afraid of? But so say we're studying Job, and one human will speak for 10 minutes on some reading or a podcast or something, or the videos. I do videos for each session. I wrote this curriculum myself based kind of on my own journey. But so she or he may, or they, I don't mean to be binary, they may talk about how it affected them for 10 minutes. Then we take a minute to hold space for that because it's sacred. And then we work on reflecting back to that person. This is what I heard you say. This is what I'm seeing. This is the image that was evoked from what you said. And by doing so, we're able to have that emotional intimacy within the groups. And then that human is able to see that they are smart. They can make decisions. We don't need to insert our opinions into anybody else. That's very arrogant, in my opinion. But letting people speak about this. So I'll do the research. You tell me what your questions are. I'll do the research. This is what I've got. Now tell me, how true does this sit with you? Like, what is this about? And then let's talk about it. So it's not any sort of, it's strict in the sense that we have specific topics that we cover. Sure. But it's also a living curriculum. If somebody says something like, you know what, I really want to talk about LGBTQ. This is what I was taught.
Yeah.
Then I'll say, you know what, let's throw in another week. Or maybe it's Christmas, so let's do something on Advent. It's very living. But there's no judgment, only compassion, curiosity, companionship.
That's really beautiful. And that seems like that has to be a theme that shows up in a lot of your work, because as I was looking at your bio, I mean, you talk to a lot of people in vulnerable places. So survivors, people who've experienced trauma, people who struggle with suicidal ideation, this thing about faith shifts and trying to figure where they're at. What would you say is active listening? Why is that so important? What's reflective listening, active listening, and how could that be a useful skill for survivors to learn, not just for themselves, but maybe as they're interacting with other survivors, because we all have different triggers and we're always kind of bumping up against each other. And so maybe you could talk a bit about that reflective listening a bit more.
Absolutely. I think that number one, first and foremost, the reflective listening has to be tempered with humility. And what I mean by humility is, I want to hear what Ashley's saying because I may never have heard anything like this before. And I want to get curious about it. And
Right.
so essentially, I'm actively holding your story in my hands, right? Like a super sweet treasure that goes in a treasure box. So you're sharing something very vulnerable with me. I recognize that that's sacred. I recognize that that's an honor. You don't have to share anything with me that you don't want to.
Mm.
And so when you do, it's a gift, an absolute gift. And so essentially, I can hold that gift with you. And then I can repeat it back to you to make sure that you and I are on the same page. And this is where humility comes in. I could be totally wrong. So tell me if this sits true with you. Tell me if this feels right to you. Am I saying it in the right way? And then if you actually say to me, actually, no, Meg, you were wrong about this, I have to be able to say, okay. So there's nothing really to lose with active listening. The whole thing is an act of love, right?
Mm.
And so safety is crazy important. I want people who speak with me to know that I am attuned to them, that I will hold what they're saying. Nothing's too heavy. Here's the other thing, now that you've brought that up, Ashley,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
I can't fix anything. And there, load off, right? I'm not
Mm.
omniscient. I'm not omnipotent. I'm not God. The best I can do is enter into the dark place with you and sit there with you so you don't have to carry it by yourself. But I can't fix that dark place,
Right.
but I can say, talk to me about it. You don't have to carry it by yourself. And I will listen and I will repeat it back to you and we'll keep tweaking. And then pretty soon we have all of those chemical bonding agents going on and you feel safe. And that is so healing.
Right, right. I can see how that would be a really beautiful gift to a survivor, particularly if they are talking about something that's really personal to them, whether it has to do with their abuse or maybe the ideology that they were taught around it, because a lot of us have a lot of baggage around not just what happened, but what was said to justify what happened. And so being able to share that and have somebody listen and say, I'm holding that, I'm respecting that, and now I'm trying to understand it by repeating back to you how I heard it in my own words, to make sure that I get it and that we're really that I really truly understand where you're coming from. And I think that's such a gift. And if you were to boil that down to maybe like 3 steps for somebody to use when they're listening to other people, because like I said, a lot of times survivors, we're bumping into other survivors. Sometimes they've got triggers, different things going on. It seems like the first step would just be listening, but what would you say, like if people were to kind of nail it down, just a couple steps?
Well, I'll probably go back to those 3 C's. First of all, I want to affirm the fact that survivors bump into each other all the time with their triggers. This has been true in the survivor community since I started Give Her Wings in 2011. Even our beautiful volunteers would be triggered because we are all in the process of healing. And so sometimes we sort of rub against each other. So we can see, like, we can either get irritated and say, oh no, now that person's narcissistic and walk away. Or we can decide that, okay, this is either a place where I need healing or they need healing or we both need healing and we can paper. Because that's all that triggers are, right? If we follow triggers back, we can say, okay, what is it why did I get triggered by this? What's going on here? Where do I need healing? Maybe it's not on me, maybe it's on them, but we have to ponder that. So anyway, I want you to know that I recognize that as a real issue among the survivor community. But back to your original question, I would say that we have to be willing to have the humility to be wrong. So we just need that mindset. Like, I don't know how many times a day I say, I could be wrong about this, but what do you think about da, 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 right? I don't know how many times because I recognize that I'm could be wrong. I mean,
Sure.
we're humans, right? Join the world of the humans where we can sometimes be wrong about things, because the worst that can happen is for us to say, I was wrong, right? Like, okay, so you're human. I was wrong about that. I can apologize. So having that, just sort of that posture of, it's okay for me to be wrong if I'm reflecting. And then curiosity. Tell me more. If I don't understand, help me understand.
Yeah.
And the undergirding for all of this, of course, Ashley, is love. I mean, my own personal theology dictates that I recognize how precious humans are, and the intricacies and the complexities, and don't ever believe that I've arrived, right? So curiosity, a lot of questions, attunement, which means I'm watching your facial expressions, your body movement. I'm reading the room. I'm seeing what's tense, and as you're talking, Ashley, and I keep using you as an example.
Yeah.
As you're talking, Ashley, I see your shoulders tensing up. So tell me about that, right?
Right.
So just a lot of attunement. So I think what I've got so far is humility, attunement, curiosity, and then I would say connection. If I'm thinking about what I want to say next, obviously I'm not listening to you, right?
Right.
But if I'm listening because you are that precious and I want to show you as much love as possible because that's how I roll, I'm going to need to slow down and listen and talk and be gentle. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I think that's really good. Absolutely. I think you hit on so many amazing points, and I think that those are practical steps that we can all learn to take in, and look for that in relationships with other people, but then also look for how we can display those things in ourselves so we can also be kind and compassionate. And it seems like it would resolve a lot of issues versus coming at things very defensively, which is often a very natural response and understandable response. So yeah, thank you so much for that. The next thing I want to shift to talking about is how can we foster a sense of unity among survivors who maybe have chosen different healing paths? And I think it definitely starts with this reflective listening, which we've been talking about, but you facilitate groups where different people decide to go on different healing paths. They come to different conclusions. They decide different things that they are going to believe. And yet I feel like there's something that binds us all together as survivors. But how do you find that unity point? How do you bring people together who maybe have vastly different perspectives in life and are on vastly different journeys?
Such a good question. And part of it is that most of the people who go through these groups are survivors. So there's that. That is a very common thread. Not everybody, but a lot of them do. We talk about active listening and reflective practice, and we discuss healthy boundaries and guidelines at the very beginning, and everyone has to agree to that there's only going to be kindness and dignity, and there won't be any judging, and we will just simply, it's again, it's not our job to say, no, you have to stay on the path over here with me because you know where I'm going. But it helps that a lot of our topics are kind of fascinating.
Right.
So we can sort of stay on that, right? So one of my favorites is Table Fellowship, where we just talk about the need for community and why we need co-regulation and how we can sort of fashion our own lives. One thing I feel like I have failed to mention that we're missing is the connection to ourselves. So I can facilitate active listening. I can facilitate teaching compassion. I mean, sometimes compassion has to be taught. So when we have these groups, every once in a while the clinician has to say, oh, we're getting off a little bit. Let's keep the focus on so-and-so, right? And so we're building these new neural pathways in our brains of learning how to hold people's stories, of kind of almost being forced by the timer. We only have 10 minutes. Now you have 3 minutes to reflect, and you have and those they walk out with new growth of how to enter into a person's story, but have the balance of being able to share their own as well. And so that kind of healthy communication is invaluable, especially for survivors. Maybe we spend all of our time being hypervigilant. Maybe we spent all of our time fawning to make sure that everyone around us was happy, and we never connected to ourselves. Or maybe we had some dogmas that where people were saying, your heart is deceitfully, desperately wicked. So don't ever look to yourself for any of the answers, right? So we over at MCCC, we work hard within our modalities to help clients connect to their own spiritual core self or their soul. There's been a lot of research that has come out. We just recently did a conference with Jane Clapp, who is a specialist in the Jungian somatic movement, under the belief and the paradigm that our soul is connected to our bodies. And so we teach people to trust themselves, and just like you talked about a few minutes ago, to trust themselves and to listen to their own gut and make their own decisions. I think where a lot of counselors, licensed or not, who, they may feel as though they're trauma informed, but the truth is, if they feel as though they can speak into someone's life and tell them what to do, that's just digging those grooves of helplessness even deeper. But people deserve the honor of connecting to their own selves and making their own decisions. So, yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. And I could definitely see how that comes back around to unifying people, because when we can be unified around the concept of everybody is free to make their own choices and we don't have to agree on everything, then that takes off the pressure that we all have to be the same, which I think when we look at like cult-like environments or a lot of different churches that people have grown up in or different relationships they've had, it was like, if you don't believe these certain things, then you're out and you're not of us. But true unity is really around, hey, I respect you as a human, and as long as you're not hurting anybody else, I respect your beliefs and your desire to make choices for yourself, even if they're different from mine, and that the unity is around our humanness versus everybody thinking and believing the exact same thing or taking the same healing path.
That's exactly it. So you just stated that so beautifully and so succinctly. It's around our humanity, our humanness, our dignity as humans. That's our unifying force. I don't even know if I could have put that into words until just now. So yes, thank you. Well, so you just did a beautiful job bringing what I said in and reflecting it back, only it made a lot more sense the way you said it.
I thought it made sense what you said. I just, all that kind of sparked and like clicked into place for me listening to you share. And that's the beautiful thing about community is I think we all have these pieces, and when we can come together, listen to each other's pieces, that clarifies one thing for me, which crystallizes something for you, which brings us to a different place. And that's just a really great way to have an empowering conversation. I love that so much. And we're going to take a quick break to have a message from our sponsors, and then we will be right back with Megan.
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing CalmiGo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using CalmiGo today.
Waking up every day in fear, living in a constant cycle of self-doubt and anxiety. We at Courage 365 know that this is what it's like for many survivors of abuse. The abuse may be over, but the healing journey has just begun. After getting professional support, the next most important step is finding a supportive community. And that's why we've created Courage Clubs. Courage Clubs are free online peer support groups created by survivors for survivors. Courage Clubs are for adults who have survived abuse and wish to build supportive community with other survivors. Each month, we discuss a new topic with helpful tools and resources for your healing journey. We can't promise your healing journey will be easy, but we can promise you don't have to do it alone. Hey everyone, we're back with Megan Cox, and we're talking about so many beautiful things for survivors, particularly those who are walking through healing in different ways. There's so many different modalities that we can use and different ways that we can connect with each other, even if we have differences. And so Megan, before I kind of move on to the next section of our conversation, I wanted to ask you, did you have any other thoughts around the topic of unity, or have you kind of given us all the things that were top of mind?
I can always talk about this, Ashley. So many. I could talk for hours. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So I discovered in some of my studies about a year ago that the word shalom doesn't mean what we were all taught in high school youth group. It doesn't mean just peace. That's a very shallow definition for a very profound word that was used in Judaica. So shalom essentially, and this even boils it down to a place that doesn't do it service, but it means wholeness with God, wholeness within ourselves, and wholeness with other people.
Oh,
So
wow.
the Hebrew mind would have seen broken wholeness as sin. Relationships are everything. And when I discovered just exactly what this word meant, I knew which modality to choose as I was working on more training to open up my own practice. I wanted something that focused on relationships, that could heal our relationship with our God or not, right? But at least to give us peace about that. And something that could heal us to us. So maybe help me connect with a rebellious teenager, maybe that I've just evicted from my life and tried to pretend like that didn't happen, just judged her, right? And then to learn how to have healthy relationships with other people, which is part of why we have the groups as well as the individual counseling. So that is a big part of why I chose these modalities, because we need connection desperately.
Yeah.
Desperately. And we need to be able to rumble, like Brene Brown says. And what I'm hearing you kind of talk about with survivors is that we need to be able to rumble, listen, have compassion, like, what are you feeling? What am I feeling? Okay, where is this coming from? Okay, I can see why you would feel that way. And this is why I'm feeling this way. Can we get past this? Because research shows that once you get past your first rumble in a relationship, that you're pretty much set for life at that point. Like if you, if you think about your friendships where you had a big blowout fight and then you came, like somehow you got through it, and now you're like loyal to the death, So, so we need to have that fluidity about our relationships in the pattern of life, because we were made for co-regulation.
Co-regulation. That's a really good way to put it, because we often just focus on our individual regulation, but co-regulation is, that's where it's at, because we're always going to be interacting with humans, and so being able to co-regulate is really a huge goal that we should all be having. Something I wanted to talk to you about is, in your bio, talks about some of the different training programs that you've gone through and the different modalities that you are skilled in. And two of them, one is EMDR and the other is, let me get the right lettering, DNMS. And I wondered if you could talk about how those trainings work, how those therapies work, and how they could be useful to the survivor community.
hmm Absolutely. I'm going to do my best here to talk neuroscience. Typically, I end up sounding like a third grader whenever I try to talk about this. Um, but um, in my own healing journey years ago, I went through 6 sessions of EMDR, and I swear it saved my life.
Wow.
We can go to talk therapy, and that's good. And we do talk therapy over at Mountain City Christian Counseling. Rochelle is my colleague and one of our clinicians. We're getting ready to hire another one in the fall. And we can talk about it and talk about it, talk about it. Sometimes, though, that means we're re-traumatizing ourselves by talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And first, we're digging a neural pathway, a groove, and we're just going over those train tracks in our brain over and over and over. And then second, we're developing what I think Bessel van der Kolk calls it the cover story. So I have my own cover story of trauma. This happened in this year, and it was really hard, right? And we think maybe we're healed because we can just say it in our cover story because we've said it so many times in talk therapy. EMDR gives us a limbic experience, which releases the trauma from our bodies. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. We use some sort of alternating bilateral stimulation, either on the light bar on the computer, goes back and forth. I have paddles at home for in-person clients, or even audio. But we wanted to go left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain. And as we do that, we are releasing trauma from our amygdala, right? So there is not a neural pathway between our amygdala and our prefrontal cortex, which this is the part of our brain that says, yeah, I know that. I know I'm safe. I know I'm safe. But then we go somewhere and we have a complete breakdown somewhere. We experience an emotional flashback or a trigger, and there's no logic to it. You can say, I'm safe, over and over. But that other part of our brain, the limbic system, is saying, definitely not safe right now. And so by using that alternating bilateral stimulation, we're creating new neural pathways. We're bringing in both hemispheres, and we're typically working somatically with the body to release the trauma as well. So that's one modality, and I love it. It's very challenging. This kind of healing, as you know, Ashley, this is not for the faint of heart, right?
Right.
This
right.
is
It goes
really,
deep.
yeah, it's very deep, very deep. And then the DNMS is Developmental Needs Meeting Strategy. We use the alternating bilateral stimulation, but in a completely different way. So DNMS is a very intuitive ego state therapy. It was created by Shirley Jean Schmidt. It's fairly new. In fact, I believe I'm the only clinician in my state of Colorado who uses it so far. And then my colleague Rochelle is getting trained in DNMS right now. But this is for, EMDR might be for a traumatic memory that we have, or a handful. What if you had a traumatic childhood?
Right.
What if your whole 20s were awful? We can't do a million little EMDR sessions for those. Right. So we work rather with parts. So this is where internal family systems comes in, where we work with parts and we develop our inner resources. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, where we want to shift survivors of trauma from just paying attention to the outside, right?
Right.
How many times have you walked into a room and said, okay, I'm reading the room. I'm an empath, right? So I know what's going on. So I need to make sure everybody's happy. And I'm just totally attuned to everybody else. But I have no idea what's going on in here. So we use John Kabat-Zinn's work of staying on the board. You've got one foot on the board. You're riding the waves. You got one foot out here. Or we also call it the Black Widow pose because it's kind of the same thing. But we want dual awareness. We want to turn people back to their souls and know themselves and trust themselves and connect with themselves. And this DNMS therapy is how we do it. So
Wow.
we connect to different parts. So maybe I have a wounded 6-year-old
Mm.
and she's still kind of hurting and she drives the car when she's triggered by
Mm.
something or somebody. So I want to bring her in and say, hey, I see you. You know, it's time to catch up with the fact that you're in a grown up body now, and then we use that ABS to help with those kinds of triggers. So
Got
those are our
it.
two main ones.
Wow. So EMDR is kind of like when you're focusing on a specific situation or a handful of specific situations, the um, DNMS is more like a lot of stuff happened when I was 6, or a lot of stuff happened when I was 18. So let's just kind of focus on like chunks of life versus just, trying to play whack a mole with every situation. Is that right?
Yes. Well, almost.
Okay. Tell me
So
more.
I like that. Tell me more. I love your curiosity. So the alternating bilateral stimulation, the EMDR, is reprocessing the same memory over and over and over while almost watching a ping pong game.
Mm,
And then we stop, we talk. Where is this in your body? Is it okay to feel these emotions? What's going on? What did you notice? And then we talk a little bit and then we keep going through it until
mm-hmm.
activation levels go down.
Right.
DNMS is more this is a wounded ego state. So I
Got
don't think I said that very well at the beginning. So it's not a traumatic memory. It's my whole 6-year-old year.
mm,
I felt like there was something wrong with me.
got
So
it.
it's a wounded ego state. It's a wounded part of me. And then we can talk to that and help
Mm,
talk to that 6-year-old and help clear some things up, right? Bring
right.
some healing.
Got it. Okay. That sounds very useful. And do people ever use those modalities together? Like, do you have to choose
I
one or the other, or can you kind of use both of them?
I sometimes I go back and forth depending on what the client needs. EMDR is much more intense. As you know, we have a whole list of criteria for when a person is ready for
Right.
EMDR. DNMS is less activating, and
Mm,
so I will typically use that if the client doesn't clear for the criteria for EMDR, but also survivors with dissociative disorders do not do EMDR well. It
got,
does not work. So we switch over to DNMS
mm,
to help those parts heal when someone's dissociating. That's because they're stepping outside their body in order to
mm,
cope, right? So we want to
right.
bring healing to that. So so I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll be doing DNMS and we'll uncover a very traumatic memory. And then
Mm,
I'll say, you know what, let's do that next week. Let's work on that next week.
right.
And then we'll come back. So it's very deep and intuitive.
Wow. Yeah, I think these are new terminologies for some of our listeners, and I hope everybody just goes ahead and like Googles these things too to kind of learn more because I feel like it's so deep. You did a great job explaining it, and I feel like people are going to want to look more into it. And I'm imagining that you have some of that on your social media and on your website. So in a minute, I want to ask where people can find you. But before that, we have a question that we ask all of our guests. And I want to ask you, and that is, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received? And it could be something that you heard a long time ago, something that you heard recently that really stuck for you, but it sounds like you've had a lot of different trainings, a lot of different experiences, and would love to know what that piece of advice is that really changed things.
Hmm. I love that. That's a great question. So, recently, in light of COVID, I was sort of answering a strong leading or just a feeling that I needed to work in the hospital. And I went to work at a hospital, and COVID started 2 months
Wow.
afterward. And after that, and I before I started that job, I was doing my clinical pastoral education. Yeah, I was doing my clinical pastoral education, and I had a supervisor, and I was really experiencing compassion fatigue, in a hospital, or, when answering a suicide hotline, or being a trauma counselor, or working with survivors. It is wounding after wounding after wounding. And if I'm, back then, if I wasn't careful, I would be just so burned out as a helper.
Sure.
And my supervisor just looked at me and she said, "You can't fix it. You can't fix it. You can only be there." And that actually was the end of my compassion fatigue. Like, that was it. Now I understood that wasn't my job. Thank God. I don't have to fix things for people.
Yeah.
Thank God. And after that, my work became very energizing to me, rather than draining, because I can't fix it.
Wow. You can't fix it. You just need to be there for them. Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that. And for those who want to follow you and your work, where can they find you online, on social media, all the places?
Absolutely. So you can look us up at our website, mountaincitychristiancounseling.com. And please, pretty please, sign up for our newsletter, because we're getting ready to open up the spiritual processing groups for people who are deconstructing. So just know, if you join the spiritual processing groups for changing your faith paradigm, that money will be going to help victims of abuse, which is beautiful.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's really amazing.
Then you can also reach out to my lovely assistant, Julie, if you're interested in one-on-one therapy. It's Julie at mountaicitychristiancounseling.com. And our social media page is just Mountain City Christian Counseling Corp. So that's what we got going on, and we would love to hear from you. So please come and join our little family.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for that, and for sharing with us today your perspective and about these different modalities that you work with. It was a really good conversation, and yeah, I'm really thankful that you came on the show. Hey, everybody. Make sure you also are following Courage 365 on all of our social media. So we have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can find us in all those places. We stream the Courage Conversation Show every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find that on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And we also have a back log of all of our previous shows. This is our season 3. So we have season 1 and season 2 on our website. And you can find that by just going to courage365.org. In addition to that, you'll find on the website our free ebook, which is 5 Keys to Living a Life of Courage, which can help you take your next most courageous steps in your survivor journey. And one thing that I want to share with you that I'm really excited about, that people have really seemed to resonate with lately, is we actually have a text list. And I'm going to pull up my phone here to show you exactly how we do this. But what you need to do to get on our text list, which is text messages that are encouraging, empowering. They are sent out to you Monday through Friday. They're written by survivors for survivors. We don't spam you. You don't get a bunch of emails from other people or a bunch of messages from other people. It's simply from us. But to sign up for that text list, all you do is open up your phone and start like you're going to be sending a new text message. And what you do is, in that to form, in the place where you're going to put in a number, you're going to type in this number. So grab your phone out, swipe it up to where you can send a message, and type in these numbers. That is 917-809-7311. I'm going to say that one more time for you. It is 917-809-7311. And then in the message portion down here, you're just going to type the word courage, just simply the word courage. You're going to hit submit. You're going to be automatically added to our morning text message list. We'll send you empowering text messages every morning, Monday through Friday. We've had so many people talk about how they just look forward to these and how it's been exactly what they needed to start their day off right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. It's been wonderful having you on the show tonight, and live with courage.